Oh, hey! How is everybody doing today? Matt, welcome to the show. How are you, sir?
I'm good, Chris. How are you? And thanks for having
Oh,
me.
excited to have you here. This is one of my absolute favorite topics. I made a call out. I said, OneLake is potentially going to outlast all of the technology that sits on top of it. So I'm really excited to have you here to learn more about OneLake and get more into that. But that's we're going to hold off on that for just a little bit because I want to welcome everyone who has tuned into the stream. We are super excited to have you. We are streaming on YouTube and on LinkedIn and on X, and we'll see if there's any other places we stream at some point in time in the future. But excited to have you here, Matt. Um, for those of you who are joining, I see Stina and I see Donald. Welcome. Stina and Donald are some of our regulars. They're here on a very regular basis. So happy to have them. But if you're new to the stream, if you've not been here before, or heck, just to give Matt an idea where everyone is from, if you could post inside the chat where you're from, would love to hear about that. We've got Simon here from the UK. Holy cow, we are already international. Isn't that exciting?
That is exciting, actually. I'm based out of New York, so if you hear trucks or sirens or cars in the background, I apologize. But it's great to see everyone and where everyone's from. Texas as
Yeah,
well.
yeah. Believe it or not, Stina in Texas is from Texas. So it's it's not
Gave it
it's
away.
not just it's not just a thing. So um oh, and we've got Brent from Eden Prairie's here. Hey Brent, what's up, buddy? I'm gonna be I might be up in your neck of the woods. I applied to speak at Sequel Saturday in Minneapolis. Got 4 sessions, fingers crossed. Maybe they'll accept some of my sessions. So hopefully I'll be up in your area. Maybe we could connect there. So and Mr. Tom Martins. Oh, good to see you, sir. Good old Germany. Now we just need someone from Asia and we'll be like really truly circling the globe here. So awesome, awesome, awesome. So, Matt, how long have you lived in New York?
About a year now. I was based out of Seattle for a while, but then moved out here to be closer to
Okay, all right.
family, taking advantage of being remote.
Okay,
So,
okay. And you're from New York?
from nearby in
Okay,
Pennsylvania.
all right, all
Uh,
right, all right. And
yeah, quite rural.
like New York City or New York State?
Brooklyn, like New
Oh,
York City,
like
city
hardcore,
in the city. Yeah.
like people with known accents that actors have to learn. New York, right?
Yes.
Like, okay, all right.
Yep.
All right, awesome, awesome, awesome. Um, excited to have everyone here. Ooh, yeah, we're doing pre-con. That would be good. Yeah, and I know Kevin's going to be up at that conference too. So, if you want to swing by, we're trying to plan something out and get that together. But uh, now we're going to be talking about we're going to get some housekeeping out of the way, and then we're going to just do some little talk conversation and stuff like that. Um, we do have a few rules. We are following Guy in the Cube, Matthew Roach rules. Rule number one: please prefix any questions with a Q. Uh, Matt is here to answer questions for everyone on the live stream, right? Like it's a conversation. I'm going to learn a lot from it, but we do want to answer your questions. Fabric is brand new to everyone. Matt, how long have you been working with Fabric?
Uh, a couple of years at this point, if you consider from like the earliest days of when this was a dream in our eyes of,
Right, right.
of where we want to go with this. But I've been on the data team in Microsoft more broadly for just over 5 years
Okay,
now.
cool. So brand new to everyone here. We've got an expert on, and he's touting 2 years of experience, and that's literally an impressive thing. Like, wow, 2 years of experience. So HR people don't get that idea. Like you're gonna put like fabric engineer 2 years. It's
Yeah.
literally Matt. You might as well just say I would like to hire Matt at that point. But if you have questions, please feel free to ask them. Just preface them with a Q so we can get them queued up and we can ask them for Matt. Don't spam the queue because like sometimes I'll hold the question because me and Matt have talked. I kind of know what he's going to talk about. So if you ask a question, it's going to like he's going to answer. I'm going to kind of hold that off. I will ask the question at the appropriate time. I don't think I have missed one yet. But please don't repeat questions over and over again. It just, we're a good community. There's not a ton of us here. So, oh my, someone got deleted. All right, alrighty. But don't delete content out there that shouldn't go out. All of that stuff. Because I've got moderators, and like we've got Kevin in the queue helping us out as well. Oh, Kevin almost logging is the wrong thing. So, but the moderators will help us guide that. But hopefully, we won't have to do much of that. But before we do anything, before we jump into the tech side, Matt, want to know more about you. You said you just got on the dad team 5 years ago, but let's take a step back. How did young Matt, who at one point in time I presume wanted to be like a firefighter or a superhero or uh, a toaster, I don't know what Matt wanted to do. How did young Matt go from
Yeah.
like childhood dreams of like jobs to working in technology? What was your
I I took my first Python coding class and I was like, this looks like
yeah?
magic. True. It was an intro class over the winter semester, and truly, I just really fell into coding from there. Took it as my major, and then 4 years later, realized I was a little bit better at the organizational side than the being in the weeds coding side. So transitioned to project management or product management, and have kind of joined Microsoft and have been on that data train all the way since.
Oh, that's absolutely fantastic. Where did you go to school?
I was at MIT for computer science.
You learned when did you wait? When did you touch Python at MIT or before that?
Yeah, freshman year. I was late to it compared to some of my friends who felt like they'd been coding for as long as they could read.
Okay. So for
But
like the normal mortals who look at MIT as this like other like nuclear power place, what can you just and I apologize for diving on this, like
no, it's okay.
what is MIT like?
I think what's so interesting is that it is in many ways extremely normal.
Mm.
Like you meet the same type of people you'd meet everywhere else, but at the same time, everyone is just working on such interesting things. You'll meet someone at a cafe, and it could be any guy from your hometown until you learn that he's got a startup on the side, or is double PhDing when he graduates, and things like that. So just a really cool place, lots of really interesting people, and a very humbling
Uh,
experience. Just
I,
definitely.
I am very sure because I would imagine you grew up with very few people who you'd consider an intellectual peer. At your school, you're probably one of the smartest guys there. Uh, so interesting to all of a sudden be thrust amongst people who are
Yeah,
now like, oh, now maybe you're
yeah,
not the smartest guy in the room all the time, and so that's fascinating.
yeah. You certainly learn to play to your strengths.
Sure. So, what's the biggest evil villain plot that you heard someone uh, like laying out at MIT with no idea that their idea was like an evil, like, oh well, I didn't think maybe it's not a
I,
good idea to build a third head on humans. I'm sorry, I got down the possibility train. It seemed like a good idea.
I feel like there was a lot going on with like the early days of crypto that I wasn't really into, so I didn't know what was going on. But looking back, there was probably certainly some interesting plans and schemes going on around crypto while I was there. I feel like we were in the earlier days of that, but I don't know. I feel like I stayed in my lane of people who were working on relatively mild things. I wasn't with anyone truly, I think, plotting world
Okay,
domination.
all right. Well, fair enough. I just didn't know if you were like, oh yeah, you gotta like watch out for that table at the cafeteria. Those guys have some genetic stuff going on that's just crazy. None of that
No,
stuff. Okay,
none of that.
all right. Well, excited to hear more from you, and let's start. Before we get into that, this is a lunch and learn, or a dinner and learn, or a meal and mature. I don't know. I don't. I need I need some more alliteration for like just sitting back and having a conversation around some food. But this is a lunch and learn, so we do a classic sip to lead us over from the like casual conversations over into the tech side. So grab your beverage of choice, be it coffee, tea, hot cocoa, whatever you got. I like my classic Mountain Dew Kickstart. I don't know why, but snack and snark. There we go, Tina. I like that. Snack and snark. Oh, where's my little mouse all of a sudden? All right, snack and snark it is. We'll start doing that. But grab your beverage and let's take a sip and then we'll dive into it. So, all right, Kevin. I'm sorry, Matt. That's Friday. I jumped to Friday. Matt, for those people who are joining us and tuning in who are not in on what OneLake is or Fabric, can we do the like elevator pitch as to what this is and where this fits?
Yeah. Of course, of course. So really, we'll start with Fabric, and the idea of Fabric is to really be that unified data platform for your entire organization. So if you look back to where it was before, you really had Azure Synapse, which was our PaaS offering that brought together data integration, data engineering, data science, data analytics, and you've got SQL, Spark, pipelines, kind of all living together in a PaaS platform, and then you Power BI over here as the SaaS offering for your reporting and advanced business analytics. And really, the goal of Fabric was to say, well, what if we could take all of this and integrate it in just like the next level up? So instead of you having to provision and manage a lot of these individual resources in Synapse, what if we could offer you to them in a completely SaaS platform? So you create your Fabric tenant, which with Power BI is really as simple as creating an email or giving them an email. You have to make the email yourself. And then you get a tenant where you can basically get started working immediately with Power BI, but then also now with a lot of this Fabric functionality. But of course, to be able to have a data platform, you need to have data storage, and that's where OneLake comes in. OneLake is a completely SaaS data lake for your entire Fabric tenant. So when you provision your Fabric tenant, you automatically get a OneLake instance that will support your entire global tenant. So it's basically a SaaS global virtualized data lake. So whenever you land data into any item in Fabric, whether that's a lake house or a warehouse or anything else, it's automatically landing in OneLake behind the scenes, and then you can then access that data in OneLake through any of the tools that you use today to access data in something like blob storage or Azure Data Lake Storage Gen 2.
Oh, that's just fantastic. And I understand that the vision is that everything that you land inside of OneLake is going to become a like a Delta file. Is that correct?
It can be,
Okay.
and certainly the idea with OneLake is, we're doing away with having separate storage systems, because if you look at earlier offerings, it was always the data lake over here and then the data warehouse over
Hmm.
here, and they were always separate storage. The data lake obviously being great for landing things like CSV files, but also JSON, images, videos. It can hold anything, and that's really the appeal of it. Just
Oh,
dump
sure,
everything in
sure.
there and then sort it out later. And then the data warehouse is saying, you've got this tabular format, you've got star schema, you've got data mesh, and you want to build out these really advanced, formats and schemas that can support, thousands of analysts and terabytes of data working over that. And so that's landing in its own, SQL server over here. The idea of OneLake is to move into a lake house model where now you can run both of those scenarios off of one data lake, basically. And so to get that warehouse functionality, that's where Delta format comes in.
Okay.
And so that's saying, you can still have your raw files and everything living over here in one side of OneLake, but then you can start to convert and prepare that data into Delta format, into our vOrder Parquet, and start to get all of that functionality that was previously reserved for a warehouse now actually happening directly in your data lake as well.
Is the idea that the warehouse file structure is going to eventually evolve into Delta or no?
Well, I think it depends on your use case. So in the context of Fabric,
Hmm.
certainly, like our SQL warehouses, our SQL endpoints, all of that is really running off of the Delta format. Of course, there's extra Fabric goodness that we build on top
Sure.
of that with things like vOrder that can really provide even more performance directly over the lake. But yeah, at the end of the day, when we talk about the lakehouse format, that really is being built on the back of the Delta format, because that gives you things like more advanced security, asset transactions, all of that, over files
Mm.
in your lake house. So you don't have to worry about moving it somewhere else. It can all happen inside your data lake. And I think Fabric and the Fabric Lake House makes that pretty simple to visualize, where every lake house comes with two sections. It comes with a file
Mhm.
section and a table section. And that file section is saying, land anything in there. We don't care what you land in there. It could be raw data, it could be slightly processed data, it could be an image or a video. But in the table section, whenever you land, a Parquet file or Delta format data into that table section, Fabric is intelligent enough to know, okay, well, I'm going to start actually building table metadata off the files that you're landing in there and provide you with a tabular view alongside the actual view of the underlying files.
Yeah, that I like that. I like that a ton. I guess what I was trying to understand is, we still have the Synapse data warehouse.
Oh, yeah.
Those are, that's the MPP platform that we've been using for a long time.
Yeah.
Um, my presumption is that today that is not in the MPP Synapse data warehouse is not in Delta files today. Is that correct?
Yeah, and that's an example of kind of the split data
Okay.
lake data warehouse I was
Yep. Yeah.
talking
Okay.
about. Yeah, in Synapse, those data warehouses are their own separate
Yep.
storage, so you can read between them, but there is still a data movement operation that needs to happen to get data
I
in there.
gotcha. And is there a talk, or are we talking about, like, or is there thoughts that maybe one day that underlying data will be in Delta files, or
So I don't know if something will happen in Synapse per se,
okay.
because there are will probably almost still be a use case for customers who do want to have more separate
Hmm.
storage. There are benefits to that, and we're not going to take that functionality away, at least nowhere right now in the
Sure.
short term. But when you look at with Synapse or sorry, with Fabric and OneLake, it's really all in the Delta format and the Lakehouse
Mm.
model to provide that SQL functionality on top of
Okay.
it.
And I absolutely love that, because that means if I like SQL, or if I have a team of people that like SQL, I'm good to go. If I have a team of people that likes Python, good to go, right? Or if I have
Yep.
a team of people that are all about the Power BI, I'm good to go, right? So any of the or I'm sorry, it's not even Power BI, it's my XMLA endpoint, right? So
Yep.
if I'm using any tool that's connecting in to and using an XMLA endpoint, Power BI is our primary one, but there's lots of tools that use that. That's fine. Any tool that runs Python or connects to Delta Lake, I can use that too, right? So we really get that open source, you know, thought or connectivity for teams that are looking for that, as well as a SQL tool, right? Because it's just a SQL endpoint, right? Any SQL tool can connect to it, right?
Yeah, and that's the advantage of Fabric and OneLake is that no matter where you're coming from, you can come through that SQL endpoint. You can come through Direct Lake. You can come through an ADLS Gen 2 API or a tool meant over ADLS Gen 2, and they're all going to be at the end of the day reading data in the OneLake. Now you may be coming through, the warehouse context, so you're looking at tables, or you may be coming through the data context and looking directly at files, but it's all the same data living in OneLake. So you never have to worry about copying multiple versions or moving it between, a lake and a warehouse. It's at the end of the day, everything is being built on top of OneLake.
Okay. And so my Delta files that I have and I'm running Python over are the same files, and it's the same data that I'm running my queries in my SQL endpoint against, right?
Yep. Yep. It's all being built for, especially in the warehouse context, it's all being built on Delta Lake, on OneLake. And of course, you have control to say, restrict access to these underlying files. I want to build a tabular model over these Delta files, and I only want you to be able to look at this through the tabular
Okay.
model because then I can put in, SQL level security on top of that. And so you still have that flexibility to kind of section off
Mm.
data and build warehouses. It's not like I can always get around and muck around with the underlying data. So you have that flexibility, but really one of the big things is it's one lake and then it's one copy. So no matter where you're coming from or what data you're accessing, you only ever need to keep one copy of that data on one lake, and then like you said, access it through SQL, access it through Power BI, access it through ADLS Gen 2 APIs directly.
Ooh, okay. I want to get into that in just a second. I think we've got two questions in the queue want to hit on, and I think we're going right in this area. So, Simon is asking, in direct lake mode for Power BI, presumably this means connecting live to the tables rather than any of the files in OneLake. Is that right? Or
Well, so tables are files in OneLake. That's the advantage,
oh,
really. So once again, Direct Lake is going through and maybe reading through a table context or reading through this data set that you've created, but at the end of the day, it's still just reading Parquet files in Delta format on OneLake. So if you have a pipeline operation that comes in and makes updates to those Delta files, Direct Lake is going to have an up to date, refreshed view because they're reading from the same source.
okay.
That's what we mean by one
And
copy.
I think that makes a ton of sense. And it's clear that, like, I mean, look, Nathan has the same question, right? I mean, like, that's the exact same question. Like, is he going to have to do this? Well, files are
No,
tables, right? They're
yeah,
the same thing, right? Inside the
yeah,
space. I think that makes a
yeah.
ton of sense, right?
Same thing. You're reading from a shortcut, but at the end of the day, you're reading that shortcut, which is linked out to that data, and you can, have that shortcut be through a table, but it's still just one copy. You're going through the same place, shortcutting out to that data, but it's still there.
Matt, one of the things that I've struggled to understand is like how you actually do the shortcut. Because every time I've seen like
Yeah.
a demo of it, it goes super fast, and I miss how and where they actually get the shortcut and how I then use the shortcut. Are you in any way prepared to show us how you could do that?
Yeah, I don't have I'm not. I have things open and I can walk you through the
Okay.
process. Yeah, so this is something I'd be happy to do. We've got a wizard that makes this super easy. So happy to kind of walk us through this experience. So if we want to just hop over and I'm happy to start sharing my screen and we can kind of do this
That'd be
live.
great. You want to share your screen and I'll
Oh yeah, of course. So this does mean that if something goes wrong, I'm not at fault
yes.
because this was not a
Uh,
prepared demo.
we are shooting
But
from the hip, not gonna hold you to any of this. Preview features are a thing, so excited to
okay, so here we go. This should share my whole
all
screen
right.
over on this monitor, so I'm
Here
just
we go.
staring off
There
into
we
the
are.
demo. Okay, great. So yeah, the easiest way to create a shortcut here is we just basically have a wizard that'll do for you. So here I can do it right from this new shortcut, or I can go into my files folder, my tables folder, and I get a new shortcut option right here. So here, the first thing is we've got the ability to obviously shortcut to internal sources, so you can link to data elsewhere in your OneLake. So say you've got a sales team over here,
Oh, hang
and
on,
they
hang
want
on,
to have
hang on.
access.
Something happened and I had to look away. Do that again.
Oh, oh yeah, it's really just whatever folder you want to link that shortcut
Uh
to.
huh.
Uh, you just right click on your little context. I think
Yeah.
that's what the dots are
The,
called, your context
okay.
menu, and you get new shortcut right there, and you won't immediately get this
Oh my gosh,
this
that's
wizard
so
pop up.
easy.
Yeah, yeah. And so from here, like I said, you can choose to link to somewhere else in OneLake if you've got teams that kind of want to share and make their own data available to other teams. Or of course, you can link to external ADLS Gen 2 accounts or even S3 now we offer as well. So we'll start by just saying ADLS Gen 2. We'll see what I can get here. And yeah, so now from here, you can see I'll actually be connecting to my account. And so I think I've got a storage account ready to go here. And so let's just get the URL for this. And this is an ADLS Gen 2 account that I already have
Okay.
created. So this is living in Azure, a completely out the context of Fabric, but still something that my identity has access to. Um, so from here, I'll just copy that in. So we've got my URL and my file system. Now I need to create a new connection, or I can use an existing connection. We'll call this one, or here, we'll connect to the DFS endpoint. Because of course, with ADLS Gen 2, you've got the idea of a DFS endpoint or a blob endpoint for that backwards compatibility. And then we'll just call this, Data God test. And for my account, we'll just use my organizational account. So this means it's actually going to use my permissions, Matthew Basile, to connect to this. So we'll get our little pop-up. I'll handle that over here.
No
And then
recording
from
his
there,
login, people.
yeah, nothing
Yeah.
popped up, but it's just the Microsoft login. But I like to be safe. And so from here, we've got our connection. We've got the connection that is being created for us automatically. So this is truly a fresh example. I've got nothing set up ahead of time, and then except of course, my ADLS account that I'm shortcutting to. And now we'll link out to my shortcut. So I think I've got if we hop over, back to this, I've got some worldwide importer data in here, just like classic sample data that you can find really anywhere in Microsoft. So I'll hop back over and we'll call this worldwide shortcut. And then we know the path was to WWI raw data, if I get that right. Just check WWI raw data. So from here, we'll just create the shortcut. And then you can see here that if I actually look into this, you can see, and I look into this, you can see I've got, oh, I don't know why it's not letting me in over there, but I can actually start to access this data. So I can go into full, and now I can see my dim city, dim customer, dim date, all of that worldwide importers raw data is now available to me, despite the fact that it's actually now still living in my ADLS Gen 2 account.
Wow.
That's incredible. Holy crap.
Yeah, the team has done a really great job of making it like literally effortless, that you can go through, the wizard pops up, it takes you through that experience, it'll create the connection for you if you don't have one already as part of that experience. And now that I've created that connection to this storage account, whenever I go back through and create a new shortcut, I can just select it again, and it's, you know, half the work's done for me already, and now this data is automatically available right here. So and I can scroll through more.
I mean, this is incredible. So this is you connecting to ADLS, so another ADLS. How would I share this to someone else? Like you have the I don't know, the COVID data or the WWI raw data. How would you share that externally?
So that would really just be about them. If they're elsewhere in Fabric, that would just be about them creating a shortcut now into my lake house, and then I can grant them access. Or there's, you know, other authentication methods that they can use, but then they would create that shortcut into us. So I believe the team is working on, you know, sharing kind of, you know, from me to someone else. But right now it's kind of more of an outside in, where you create the shortcut into that team's data once you've been granted
Okay.
access.
All right. Fair enough. Now, the question is, okay, so these are here. How do I connect to these in a way so that I can put these into Power BI in direct like mode?
Yeah, so really the way to do that would be to use the load to tables functionality. So I see we've gotten a couple questions with that, and it looks like we have tried without creating load to tables in Power BI. I cannot see it. Yeah, so from here, we will use the just to show you what I'm doing. We'll use the load to tables wizard here, um, and basically take this file that is in our file section, so kind of our raw data section, and load it into our table section, where now you can start to, you know, access it through the SQL endpoint or have more of the advanced Power BI functionality on top of it. So let's take fact sale. We will do load to tables. We'll create a new table. You know, gives us a name for it automatically. These are Parquet files, and we'll include any subfolders. And then, you know, hopefully, once again, untested, unprepared part of this demo, but we'll this should just go through. Fingers crossed. But yeah, so now that it's here, it will be accessible as a table, but then you still have the ability to access the data in here as a file more directly. Sorry, so I hop back over here. We'll go back to fact sale. So if we look at this fact sale folder and hop over to the properties, you can see that we've got a URL here to connect to this data as well. And I can use this URL anywhere I can use an ADLS Gen 2 URL. That's really one of the big advantages of OneLake, is that compatibility between what OneLake is able to connect to, and then everything that's been built and designed to work over ADLS Gen 2 or Azure Blob Storage that people have been using for, you know, years and years and years up to this point.
Sure. Okay. All right. Now, and just for clarification, you linked in the tables, but then you loaded it, or you brought in the files, then you
Yep.
loaded it to the table. If there
Yeah,
is a
and
change in that underlying file, do I have to reload it to the table, or is it just automatically in the table?
so that you should have to reload the table, because basically what we're doing here is we're taking the Parquet files that we're shortcutting out to,
Okay.
and then we're kind of loading them into delta formatted tables now over here in my table section. So there's not a direct link between this table that I've now created and the original Parquet data.
Okay.
Now, if I go to my ADLS Gen 2 account that I'm linked to, that my shortcut is linked to, and I change the data here, then that will affect the data here because that's directly being linked to.
But I'd have to refresh this in order for it to show up in the Delta file, right?
Yeah, and that would be something that you could do, for example, with a pipeline. Is you can have a pipeline that's set up to even kick off these operations, or takes the shortcutted data on one side and then runs a regular refresh.
Okay. So I still have some refreshing that has to be done into these Parquet files, but it's not as bad as like having to copy all the Parquet files over and manage those, because I now just have
Yeah,
one.
and
Okay.
and it's basically moving from one folder in OneLake to a folder right next to it in OneLake. So instead of having to copy it to a completely different storage system, it's basically just moving within a storage account, which is much faster and easier.
Now, and Nathan is asking a good question, and we'll break the rules here. There's no cue, but it's okay, Nathan. It's fine. Like, is there any way to get it to refresh automatically as the data is coming in? Like, the idea being we want to have live streaming data that comes in.
Yeah.
How can we get that working?
Yeah, so that's something that we're definitely working on. So we've gotten a couple requests for more functionality related to basically OneLake notifications and eventing.
Mhm.
So, event-based triggers, better automatic refreshing, things like that. So obviously I'll get my notification here um, that I'm completed, but obviously, yeah, the idea is, can I kick off a bunch of other operations, including a refresh related to that? It's definitely something we're working on. It's just not available in preview right now, but we've gotten definitely a lot of feedback around that, and it's certainly something we're working on. And you can see here, my table has now been created. We'll see. Hopefully, everything will load properly. But then I will be able to actually preview this fax sale table.
Okay, and Tom is mentioning, can we link directly the Delta files?
Yeah, so you can see I can also create a shortcut directly in my tables
Okay.
folder. So if I create that shortcut to a Delta
Mhm.
table, then OneLake and the lake house will treat that like if I were to load a Delta table in here directly, and it would appear here as a table automatically. So one way of doing it, so that's if you're saying I want that more automatic refresh. Well, if you already have a Delta table living in an ADLS Gen 2 account, then you can actually shortcut to it directly from your tables folder, and it will appear and be treated like a table.
I gotcha. Okay. All right. I think that makes sense. Um, yeah, and that means, and honestly, this goes right into Simon's question about like, hey, so presumably we could do lots of refreshes on it to keep it up to date, so it's a near real time or micro batch processing and whatnot. But how you've articulated it is, and I want to make sure I understand this. So I've got my file that I've landed in my bronze layer, right? That's my raw file. So JSON, CSVs, whatever, right? I create that load into my Delta file, and I process and manage that one place, right? I keep that up and running in one place. That Delta file is what I can share to other people so that they can consume and use that. And then they do not have to manage additional refreshes. It's just that one table that I'm refreshing. Is that right, Matt?
Yeah, exactly. You can kind of maintain a central Delta table and then shortcut that out, or other teams would be shortcutting in kind of to that table. And then, yeah, they would kind of get access to refreshes automatically because that shortcut is live, basically. It's just a symbolic link almost to that data. So that's a really great way to have teams that may manage kind of central data sources and then make that data available to other
Well,
teams.
and if you think about like the whole like data mesh, the hub and spoke model, right? That means those teams at those hubs can do that and distribute it out, and the other teams don't have to worry about that operations or maintenance. They know that it's always up to date, that it's always accurate. Yes. Oh,
Yep.
that's
Exactly. When we say one copy, like we mean one copy, and shortcuts are a really big way to achieve that, where one team can kind of centrally manage that data instead of copying it out to different teams, and then you have to have regular refreshes scheduled or event-based triggers. You can just shortcut that out, and then that data will be kept up to date for anyone that is consuming those shortcuts.
That's fantastic. Now, another question Nathan's come in, and I think I know the answer to this. So he's asking, can Delta tables be from Databricks Delta table? Does that work? And if so, why would I want to use Databricks, or why would I specifically want to use Fabric in this situation?
Yeah, so there shouldn't be any issues with reading a Databricks Delta table. We are there. We are where there is a small bug related to Unity catalog that we're trying to figure out, and there are, of course, little things during preview that we're trying to iron out. So if you are having issues, like please do let us know, because obviously there's many edge cases here, but there shouldn't be any issues reading that Delta table from Databricks, really in any case, because everything is designed to be compatible with Delta Lake and kind of the core Delta format. So shouldn't be any issues there. In terms of why you would use one or the other, I mean, it's really up to you. We've seen this cooperation between Synapse and Databricks for a very long time, where some teams just prefer to use Databricks and have really a Spark only experience, but then they're still writing that data back out to ADLS Gen 2, where it can be consumed by a pipeline or by SQL or by Power BI. While other teams like to have a fully integrated experience where you've got Spark running in Fabric in this case, right alongside your warehouse and everything. So it's really up to teams, up to your individual usage. Our goal is just to make sure that everything works as smoothly as possible. Yeah, and I see from Donald, Unity catalog was funky. Yeah, we're working on getting that hammered out as quickly as possible. But yeah, there are some issues right now for Databricks. You can use AAD pass through
Hmm.
to actually read files and data in OneLake. That should work. We know that Databricks is working to get everyone on Unity catalog, and so we're doing our best to support that. But in the meantime, AAD pass through does work.
I have heard Donald's not the only person who's expressed challenges with Unity catalog. So, okay, that's great. But I thought one of the big advantages of Fabric was that it would store the data in VSort order, so that it would be more performant on the front end in Power BI. Is that the case, Matt?
Yeah, and that's once again kind of the goal of Fabric and OneLake is that it supports your entire data
Hmm.
ecosystem, from the raw data that you've just landed in to the intermittent processing and preparing in the middle, and then all the way to the actual serving layer. And vOrder really comes in that serving layer, where yeah, you've got your data, you've processed it, you've landed in Delta format, you've got vOrder going on top of that, and then when you bring in Power BI and Direct Lake mode, that's when you're going to really see the advantage in the performance of that. So OneLake spans more than just vOrder, and don't feel like you have to, not everything has to be in vOrder right away. OneLake
Uh,
supports that whole process from your bronze raw your bronze raw data all the way up to like your gold and platinum data, which is in Delta format and in vOrder. So OneLake supports all of it,
sure.
and yeah, you'll get to vOrder at the end for that serving
Well,
layer.
that's fantastic. Now, we're going to take a complete uh, oh, well, actually, well, before we do a complete left turn, we'll swing over to Ernest, um, or Ernesto. He's got a question about JSON support.
Yeah. So once again, OneLake as a data lake doesn't care if you land JSON in there. That'll be fully supported in the files section of your lakehouse. And then the question is, what do my engines support JSON? So can I read it with SQL? Can I read it with Spark? Both engines definitely have support for that. I'd have to check on what our SQL story is with that, but obviously Spark definitely has support for reading JSON. So kind of once again, at the end of the day, it's does OneLake support it? Yes, we're a data lake. We don't care. And then what engine am I trying to read on top of that, read that JSON with, and then looking at those individual solutions. Does our SQL support it? Spark certainly does. So kind of looking at it, that two-layer solution.
Fantastic. Now, you brought up this topic, and we're going to roll back to this. You mentioned um, one place to be able to define security and access. So
Mhm.
I know we have like environment security. So at my workspace, I could secure that. Um, are we at the point where we have object level security, so I can say individual people or individual groups have access to individual items? Where are we at on that story?
Yeah, so we're certainly working on it. I'd say one of our highest priorities is our one security
Hmm.
story. So one lake, one copy, one security. So we don't have. I don't think there's a lot I can talk about right
Okay,
now.
that's fine.
Things are being worked on. I think we've got a lot of really exciting things that will come eventually in terms of trying to bring as much of that security to the lake layer as possible, so you can set that format, set security one place, and then have, once again, whatever tools coming in be running off the same security model. But I think we're just a little bit farther away from being able to talk about that. But I'd love to get a follow-up session going. We can,
Uh,
to talk about that more.
that is uh, totally fine, right? I just want to like express what are the layers that I'm hearing people ask for, and if in
Mhm.
chat you have something other than I'm going to touch on 3 points, and then I would like to hear if someone in chat has other ways that they would like to be able to think about or manage security in OneLake. I see it as object level is important, row level
Mhm.
security, and then column level security. And I'd like to be able to maintain
Yep.
encryption with without losing data types inside of here. Are these things being discussed? Yep.
Yep.
Okay.
100%. Yeah. Because when you look at where we're coming from with things like Synapse and, the Synapse SQL Data Warehouse and, ADLS Gen 2, you've got a couple different security models with how ADLS handles files versus how, SQL handles table and the row and column level security. So, of course, doing work to make sure that we can have a security model that makes
Mm-hmm.
sense and an environment where all of those things have now come together. But those are certainly highest on our list for making sure we can support. And what does that story look like, and how does it make sense?
Fantastic. And no, I think the next logical question that we have in that along that line is like integration with Purview and data cataloging and enablement and governance. Uh, I know we've seen lots of stories around Purview. Can you talk at all about the direction you're going and the integration we're going to see inside of Purview?
Not my area of
Okay.
expertise. I can touch on it a little, but yeah, once again, it's just bringing as much to the lake layer as possible. Where before it was, maybe integration with specific things like a catalog over here in Spark or what's going on in SQL, and then just how can we make that as unified of a metadata
Mm.
and governance layer as possible? Because OneLake offers us a really great opportunity to, like we said,
One lake.
unify
Right.
one copy of data, one security, all of that. And so how can we bring Purview to that layer as well and continue to build that functionality is probably all I can say for now. But I'd say that's another big area that we're focusing on, in the coming
Okay,
months.
and that's great. And uh, honestly, I think that also like it gets me. Well, I'll say my last thing, and you're going to say that's not your area, but I would like to see a data quality and cleansing layer at the OneLake level, so that we
Yeah.
could understand how valid the data is, that data type consistency, how populated it is. I mean, if I'm looking across 10,000 Parquet files, I want to know how like how consistent is this schema, like to be able to tackle
Mhm.
schema drift. Is that are you doing anything in those spaces at all?
I'm
That's
not
good.
working on that personally. I work on more of like the base storage connectivity, integration with things like our ISVs and, other tooling, open source. So certainly I think there's a lot of great topics for follow-ups, especially as,
Sure.
information starts to go live. But yeah, even OneLake itself is a massive team with a lot going
That
on.
is,
So
that's exactly right. And but and maybe we could circle it back to like a question that I think I saw from Nathan about like, hey, he's got some text files, he's having some issues with that. Um, correct me if I'm wrong. OneLake and ADLS two, those use the same APIs and the same have a lot of the same capabilities. Is that right?
yep. Yeah, our primary goal for OneLake was compatibility with existing ecosystems. And if you look at Synapse and all the tools and code that our partners and customers have been using for years and years now, it's all designed to work over ADLS Gen 2 and or Azure Blob Storage. So our primary goal with OneLake was saying, we're offering you
Mm.
this new SaaS data lake, but you need to be able to come up and use your Azure Storage Explorer, use your same PowerShell packages, use your Python SDKs to be able to interact with OneLake with as few changes as possible compared to ADLS Gen 2.
Okay, so I can take if I've got a whole bunch of APIs that are running against my ADLS G2, and I'm thinking about migrating stuff into Fabric, I could set up like parallel paths and not have to recode everything, right? I could just define that as a
The only
variable
thing
and
you need to
run it
change.
twice, right?
Yeah, the only thing you need to change is that endpoint. So you've got, on ADLS Gen 2, it's dfs.core.windows.net, or your account name, dfs.core.windows.net. And on OneLake, it's onelake.dfs.fabric.microsoft.com. And you can see that, in your portal as well. You go to properties and pop it up, and you can see the Fabric URLs for any files or tables in Fabric. And all you do is you replace your ADLS Gen 2 URL with that OneLake endpoint,
Mhm.
and it just works.
Oh, that's fantastic. So let's take that another step. That means, and you tell me if I'm right or wrong on this one, I can use pretty much all of the ADLS G2 documentation and programmability inside of OneLake for the most part.
Yep.
Yeah.
Yep.
Mm.
Yeah. If you look at a lot of our OneLake documentation, we're basically just, referencing out to ADLS Gen 2 walkthroughs or examples, and then just calling out, where you might need to make a change. So, you may need to update a custom endpoint, or, OneLake only supports like the token or OAuth authorization. So just calling things out like that. But it's really, start with that ADLS Gen 2 example, replace your endpoints, and things just work.
Oh, I like it when I hear they just work. A little concerned that Nathan had some issues with the text file, but I presume maybe that was
Yeah, I think that's just saying, can I use text files in the tables section of a lakehouse? And the answer is the table section is designed for Delta formatted data. So it can't recognize a table out of like a CSV file. It's only going to recognize that if it's a Parquet file in the Delta format. But that's the goal of the load to tables functionality, right? You can take a Parquet or a CSV file, and then we'll do the work of converting that into a Delta table that's now available in your lakehouse.
right. And for those of you watching, if you're looking for scripts on how to like automatically process that stuff or notebooks and stuff like that, I've got it out of my Git repo. Check the live stream from a week or two ago. We put that out there, so that's available. I'll post it into the chat as well. So you can just leverage that existing scripts to do that stuff. All right, now, Matt, we don't have a ton of time left, and I'm very grateful for you being here. I know you had a couple examples and demos you wanted to like showcase and highlight. Is there something in particular you'd like to show the people here?
Yeah, let me just get a few things going on my side. But really, a lot of the demos for the area that I work on are often kind of boring, for exactly the reason that I said. Where the goal is saying, I've got something that runs over ADLS Gen 2. I'm going to change a URL. I'm going to run it over a OneLake, and we're going to get a 200 OK.
Okay.
And that's all we need. But that's the goal, right? This isn't something we want to be exciting or interesting. We want everything to just work. So to show you what that looks like, for example, you can see here I've got Postman ready to go. And assuming I set up my token validation first, um, can you stop
Oh,
sharing my
yeah,
screen? I
yeah,
just
no
gotta,
problem. Sorry.
I gotta,
Yeah, get
of
your app
course,
key.
rookie
Don't
mistake.
have that out there. Yeah, yeah.
Yeah,
No, thank you.
I let my access
Yeah,
token
yeah.
expire.
All
So
good.
just
And while you're doing
I'm
that,
gonna.
Ernesto, if you want to rewatch, we covered that. If it's a file coming into the bronze layer, you do have to schedule that refresh into the Delta files. We only have to do that in one place. So it's the Delta file that's being refreshed. That Delta file is then what gets shared out to different teams and different areas, and they don't have to keep refreshing that Delta file. So they could just have that data, it's updated and it's refreshed in one place. Okay. But you do have to manage that from when something lands, then load it into the Delta, and then it's there in the Delta. And that's kind of a good thing because unless you have it streaming into the Delta, which you can do, you'll probably want to do some data quality checks, some like processing most of the time before you load that in, because hey, a CSV is as good as a CSV is, right? And you always want to check your data quality. All right. Okay. Are you okay to
So
share it now?
yeah, I've got something else
Okay.
I can show right
Awesome.
now. So what I want to show off now, and I'll zoom in as much as I can, is an example of using the Python SDK. So this is the Azure Storage Python SDK. Let's see if I can zoom in a little bit more. But the goal here is this is something that you could run over ADLS Gen 2 today. This is the example that we built this code off of is the ADLS Gen 2 Python SDK example.
Okay.
I can actually pull that up right now as well. But the goal here is to show off how few changes you actually need to make to use something built for ADLS Gen 2 and have that actually work over OneLake. So you can see here, the first thing we're doing is, of course, is just, importing all of our packages, nothing crazy here, but, making sure we have the file data lake package, the data lake service client, and then the default Azure credential, which will allow us to actually use, AAD authentication and AAD pass-through to get access to our data. So the first thing, and we're going to run two commands here. The first is going to be an initialized storage account that's actually going to let us create a service client that's authenticated, in this case, to we're out of Excel land, but that authenticates to OneLake here, and then we can use that service client to actually then go through and continue to run different operations over OneLake. And if the only change that I've had to make here is I've changed this endpoint. So if we look at the existing example, and let's see if I can zoom in a lot. So I know this is quite small right now, but this is the live online ADLS Gen 2 example, and you can see the relevant line here is it's building an ADLS Gen 2 endpoint. It's taking your account name, and then it's saying dfs.core.windows.net, and that's the endpoint it's going to use to connect to. We don't need to, in this case, we need to build a OneLake endpoint. So all I've done is swap out dfs.core.windows.net for dfs.fabric.microsoft.com. It's the only change I need to make compared to the live example in ADLS Gen 2. And then from here, I'm going to take that service client, and I'm actually then going to start to make commands with it. And actually, in this case, we're just going to be listing the contents of a directory in OneLake. And here, I actually needed to make no changes. The only thing I did was I updated some language to say we're using a workspace here instead of a file system. That's kind of a one-to-one mapping you can make from ADLS Gen 2 to OneLake. And then I'm just saying, get all the paths in that workspace and print them out for me. And so the actual command I'm running down here at the bottom is I'm just saying, run my file. My account is just going to be OneLake. My workspace is, the workspace I've created in my Fabric account, and then my Lakehouse as well. And I'm going to be reading from the files folder here. So all I need to do is run this, and then, it's going to connect, and then it's going to spit out the list of, everything in my workspace in that files folder. And you could just as easily go through. You can see we've got, this WWI raw data we've been working with. We've got all of our table files here, dim supplier, fact purchase. I can scroll through this list right here and take a look at it. But the idea here is saying, this could be something that you're just as easily running over an ADLS Gen 2 account. Truly, all I would need to do would be to change this endpoint back to ADLS Gen 2. And then instead of supplying a workspace, I'm just going to be supplying an account name and a file system. And that's the only changes I needed to make to update this code to work over, from ADLS Gen 2 to working over OneLake. And that's the same for anything. I can flip just as easily over to PowerShell. Same thing. I create a context and I use that context to authenticate. In this case, I'm just going to be using a fabric.microsoft.com endpoint instead of the typical ADLS Gen 2 one. And you can see this again and again with Azure Storage Explorer, with PowerShell, with whatever SDK you want to use, even with Databricks. Put in the OneLake endpoint, and it just works. And that's been, our day one connectivity goal for OneLake. And something that we're really proud of because it just makes it so easy to, like you said, you may have, massive projects that you've built over years to work over ADLS Gen 2, and you don't need to download a new SDK. You don't need to, make any updates there. Just swap out the endpoints and everything will just work.
This is fantastic. So I absolutely love this. I think, well, let me turn off your screen.
Yeah. No, I'm running in the background, but I hope.
No, yeah. And so I'm starting to think about companies who are, they're heavily using Databricks today, right? Tons and tons of stuff, right? They're spending a million or whatever, or 100,000 on Databricks today, if they if or when they wanted to say like, okay, you know what, we want to have Fabric as a major component, all this means is changing that file pathing from files that are pathed and mapped inside of an ADLS2 account to the same files that are pathed and mapped inside of Fabric. Is that right, Matt?
Yep.
Yeah.
Yep. So like we said, barring this Unity catalog issue that we're working on right now with the Databricks
Mhm.
team, Databricks can fully read and write and interact with OneLake. You can create Delta tables and then land them in the tables folder and have them be accessible from the Lakehouse and recognized as tables. All of that functionality is there. And once again, you can truly have the same notebooks, one running in Spark and Fabric, and then one running in Databricks, and have them be basically identical as well. Just adjust those endpoints to use OneLake endpoints, and everything just works.
Wow. And that also means you could just be writing those outputs into two places, right?
Yeah, and that's something we see with an organization. Some teams prefer to use Databricks, and some teams may prefer to use Fabric Spark. But at the end of the day, as long as you have OneLake as that centralizing layer, everyone can work with and interact over the same data.
Wow, that
And Databricks is all in on the Lakehouse model and Delta Lake as well,
right.
obviously. And so the compatibility with Fabric is at really at an all time high because both organizations are really going all in on Delta Lake and the Lakehouse format, so they work really well together.
Well, that honestly, I think that's just fantastic.
Yeah.
And modern problems require modern solutions.
uh, that's what we're talking about, right? Like we've got this modern problem of like, hey, our tooling on top may change all the time, right? Like maybe you're using Databricks, maybe you're using Fabrics, maybe you're using both, or maybe you're using the brand new Meatloaf 2000 tool that just rolled out, right? Or I don't know, like
Yep.
whatever it is, if it can process Delta files and it can read and write into like OneLake or a bucket, that that's fantastic, right?
Yeah, yeah, of course. I mean, once again, the goal of OneLake was to be like the one drive for data, is the quote you'll see us sometimes throw around, where it's really flexible, it can support all these different things running on top of it, but at the end of the day, it's still an open ecosystem. Because when you hear data centralization, some companies and organizations rightfully hear, oh, lock in, lock in, lock
Right.
in, and lack of access to the tools that they prefer to use. But by taking OneLake and building it to be compatible with these APIs with ADLS Gen 2 and blob storage that have been around for years now, and open source and ISVs are all able to work over them. We've made OneLake very, very easy to get started with. Despite being something that is not very old, the accessibility and the APIs that it's being built on top of between ADLS Gen 2 and SQL Endpoint, those are interaction points that have been around for years and years and years. So these teams have been working on, interacting with OneLake for years now, even if OneLake itself is only a few months
Wow.
old.
I mean frankly, I'm so happy to see Microsoft's pivot into that open source, like hey, just come in and use the tools that you need to have, work and operate here, because that paints such a great picture for not just today, but for the rest of our career, right? So,
Yeah, exactly.
and is I have heard, but maybe this is not the case. Eventually, everything ADLS G2 is just going to be in OneLake.
I wouldn't say
Okay.
that, because at the end of the day, there are always going to be customers who want a PaaS offering, right? Like at the end of the day, OneLake is a SaaS offering. So, your Fabric tenant manages your OneLake. And that means you don't necessarily have like 100% control over your OneLake. For example, you can't delete a workspace through an ADLS Gen 2 API in OneLake, because OneLake says, we're enforcing the structure of, workspace into Lakehouse. And so if you want to delete that workspace, you have to delete it through a Fabric experience.
Okay.
While, if you provision an ADLS Gen 2, if you're an owner in ADLS Gen 2, you can do whatever you want. which is great for some use cases, but if you not as great for others. And so I think there are always going to be use cases where a company says like, I want a SaaS data lake. And ADLS Gen 2 is used for use cases beyond Synapse and Databricks and Power BI as well. And so there's always going to be that use case for having a SaaS data lake offering available to customers in Azure. But for customers who are coming into Fabric and coming into Power BI and all of these new experiences, OneLake should be more than enough to cover all of their storage needs there.
Well, I guess I would press for the simplification of the tool. Just make it so you have both patterns that you can enable inside of OneLake, right? Make it so you can have those types of controls in OneLake if you so chose to around a workspace. I think there's a way to make that work. Is what I'm saying.
Yeah, and that's certainly part of the goal of shortcuts as well, where you can say, I have an ADLS Gen 2 over here. I want to run that in my own tenant for X, Y, and Z reasons. But at the same time, I want that data to be available and accessible in my OneLake without having to perform any data movement. So definitely things like shortcuts can kind of, expand the virtual reach of your OneLake into S3 and into other ADLS Gen 2 accounts as well.
Well, Matt, this is super exciting. I just love the stuff that you and the team are doing. What's the best way for people to get a hold of you if they've got questions or anything?
Yeah, you can find me on LinkedIn, and as well, I'm happy to put my link to that in the chat. And then we have our Fabric Ideas site as well. So that's really the best place to submit feedback, feature requests, things like that. My personal request is if you are running something that works over ADLS Gen 2 and does not work over OneLake, please let us know. The biggest issue we're seeing is URL validation. Things see this new fabric.microsoft.com URL, say, I don't know what that is, and block us automatically. We're working on addressing those wherever we can, but please let us know through Fabric Ideas if you're coming up, and we always are happy to try and get involved with open source and get those things fixed as well.
Oh, that's absolutely fantastic. Well, Matt, do you have any parting words for our audience here today or future viewers of this stream?
Get hands-on with it. I think it's never Fabric, out of everything we've ever released in the data space, nothing has been easier to get started with and try out than Fabric. And so I really encourage you, just get hands-on, get your OneLake, get a lake house going, get a warehouse going, and just try it out. It's truly never been easier. And we just love having people kick the tires and getting feedback of any and all kinds.
Yeah. Matt, you're spot on. Get in there, get started doing it. It's super easy. If a moron like I can get it up and going, I guarantee you can do it too. So, Matt, thank you so much. Thank you, everyone, for joining us today. We will see you on Friday, where Kevin and I are going to be going deeper into Fabric. I don't think, Kevin, do we have a topic yet? Kevin? I don't know. I don't see the chat here. So maybe we have a topic. Maybe we don't. We'll see. We'll get that out and we'll announce that. But you guys have a great day. Peace. Baker Tilly Digital combines strategic industry insight and advanced technical expertise to uncover and solve your digital transformation challenges. If you're interested in learning more, check out our website at bakertilly.com/digital.